Hello everyone, and thanks once again for joining us this time for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, we've got on the hazardous weather graphic a wind chill advisory that continues here for the eastern interior, Eagle, 40-mile country, and along the Alaska Range back in toward Denali. That's out for, or through midnight tonight, or is scheduled to end at midnight tonight. And that's for winds of 15 miles per hour or greater, resulting in wind chills that could be down around 40 below zero. Otherwise, the winter weather advisory for the southern panhandle has ended at noon Sunday. So that's about the only advisory left in the state. No watches or no warnings at all. And moving on to satellite imagery, you can see this system here, we've got a system moving eastward there across the Queen Charlotte Islands, another one backing to the west across or along the Aleutians, and a frontal boundary right through here from, well, the northern Bering Sea, then down across Kodiak, Gulf of Alaska into the Panhandle. With those two systems separating, you can see this portion of the frontal boundary really dissolving, getting pulled apart and dissipating, especially across northern Bristol Bay throughout the day today. And that's the area here that brought the snow into the southern southeast coast, where anywhere from 2 to 8 inches fell during the last 24 hours. And that's ended now for the most part, just showers remaining, lighter precipitation and dry conditions up to the north with continued diminishing winds. Otherwise, a pretty fair day here around Yakutat, south central Alaska, looking good. Very cold morning in Copper River Basin, temperatures down to about 44 degrees below zero at Gulkana, and also cold over areas of the eastern interior. Milder here back to the west a little bit, but fair skies. The Alaska Peninsula's front again really falling to pieces here. We've got another weak system, actually a little bit stronger, but not all that strong, out over the west central Aleutians there near Adak, but a pretty weak front here coming across the eastern areas there with some light rain through that area. With some lingering showers here along the Alaska Peninsula, but amounts today really just a few hundredths of an inch. Same thing for Kodiak Island. I believe they only picked up about 2/100ths of an inch at Kodiak State Airport during the day today, with some light precipitation possible out here with this portion of the cloudiness, but again, very light. Otherwise, up there along the eastern Arctic coast, some flurries, especially early on. Kind of the trailing edge, you can see the moisture sliding southeastward into northern Canada there. The bulk of that already well off to the southeast, and that's just leaving some few clouds and a few flurries along the eastern shores there, and that's about it. Otherwise, the interior looking basically light winds and dry conditions. Rolling that again, you can see again this frontal boundary dissolving, and most of this shifting west-northwestward, and that portion sliding off to the east. So we've got upper level high pressure here over the northwest interior that's actually beginning to weaken and becoming more of a ridge as opposed to the closed center that's been up there, and that's going to continue to progress eastward, and eventually, actually starting tomorrow, we're going to be getting into a southerly flow, southwesterly flow aloft. So this area of moisture will be coming northward here over the next day or so. Otherwise, on the chart today, just a real weak front here with areas of light rain along it from again, Kodiak and southern Kodiak Island, showers the Alaska Peninsula, a little bit of light rain out toward the Pribilofs. This next front really not all that much stronger, a little more continuous zone of rain there coming into the eastern Aleutians, wrapping back in where it's mostly rain and snow showers out over the western Aleutians there, a little bit cooler air, but not all that cold. And over the southeast coast, had the snow earlier today. Again, the winter weather advisory ended at noon down in that area, but continued dry and cold up over the northern panhandle with diminishing winds, still a gradient there. But you can see the central pressure that high down to 1,036 millibars, down from the 1,050 it was yesterday and yesterday morning. But that keeping it nice over the North Gulf Coast areas and continuing to dominate the interior areas, coldest temperatures in the east, a few flurries on the extreme eastern Arctic coast, and then some cloudiness here right along the coastline up in towards St. Lawrence Island. Looking at the forecast for tonight, stays fair with light winds over all of interior Alaska. Maybe a few lingering flurries on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and that's about it, with some possible lower clouds or fog. Otherwise, better conditions back to the west. A little breezy there, Point Leon down to Cape Lisburne, but nothing too terribly strong, 15 to 25 miles an hour, and that's about it as far as the winds go. And this system continues to slowly slide southward and weaken, so the snow showers will continue to taper off, becoming dry over the southern panhandle as the bulk of that moisture slips on into British Columbia. High pressure continuing to weaken, as you can see here, getting pinched off. A couple of disturbances still traveling southeastward there. But high pressure continues to weaken, but basically holds for the next couple of days in that area. And then we got this system again coming northward, so rain and wind on the increase of the Alaska Peninsula late tonight. Isolated showers around Kodiak, of rain or snow, be very light. And then we got periods of rain continuing for the eastern Aleutians, and winds on the increase here for the Pribilofs into the Bering Sea areas of the small craft advisory levels there. And pretty unsettled with that low center near Amchitka Island out over the southwest Bering Sea. And then looking ahead to tomorrow, we'll see this area of moisture continues to lift northward, southerly and southwesterly winds aloft now, and the jet stream coming up, pushing that up into at least definitely across Kodiak, possibly into southern Cook Inlet, across Bristol Bay, looking at precipitation mostly in the form of rain there, kind of a rain-snow mix right through here, and then some snow with increasing winds for the Kuskokwim Delta. And areas of the interior, especially the higher elevations, will be a little bit breezy there, but not all that bad. Actually, winds will continue to come down. The wind chill advisory ends at midnight tonight, so winds will be lighter, but still a little breezy there from Delta Junction. And in that area, fair over the Panhandle, looks pretty good. Just a few remaining clouds down over Dixon Entrance, and winds continue to diminish. Will continue to diminish through Lynn Canal through tomorrow. And pretty good conditions over the northern Bering Sea. Looking ahead, we can see that that system lifts northward, so look for a chance of snow to come across south central Alaska overnight tomorrow night, later tomorrow night, and into Tuesday. Slowly lifting northward here will be a band of light snow along that trough from the southern Seward Peninsula on down into the Copper River Basin. Mixed rain and snow along the outer coastline there, the North Gulf Coast. And then this front, not all that strong, definitely not a wind producer, will be kind of a widespread light rain producer. And of course, any elevation will be in the form of snow or mixed rain and snow. A trough here along the southwest coast. Wind's a little gusty out along the Yukon Delta coast back to St. Lawrence Island, but look for just showers along the trough itself down across the Alaska Peninsula. And another system here may be bringing possibly minimum gale force winds at the highest here in across the eastern Aleutians from Atka to Unalaska, with rain back to about Kiska Island. And temperatures, lows for tomorrow, 25 to 35 below to a little above zero in the west. And then for the highs, tomorrow, milder here over the Panhandle, mid-20s to upper 30s, and staying below zero eastern interior to the eastern Arctic coast, but highs warming into the lower to mid-upper 20s here south central Alaska, lower 40s in the Alaska Peninsula. And the lows for the Tuesday morning, still a little below zero there, but in the minus 20s, above zero in the west, and highs continue to warm.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather, first graphic here showing some IFR along the eastern Arctic coast up there, locally marginal into the North Slope, and then Brooks Range southward, good VFR again through the interior, St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait, into northwest Canada, down into the Gulf of Alaska, and the southeast coast here, except some marginal VFR early morning hours there over the southern Panhandle there, Prince of Wales Island on eastward. IFR out here beginning to increase and build over the Bering Sea here, and especially even the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Marginal VFR coming up mostly along the east side of Kodiak Island. And then for tomorrow afternoon, a big deterioration in conditions there, spreading IFR all the way across Kodiak, Shelikof Strait into the Barrens. Marginal VFR penetrating into the southern Cook Inlet area, definitely Kachemak Bay, southern Kenai Peninsula. But VFR, again, interior areas, Prince William Sound northward to the Arctic Ocean, northern Bering Sea, VFR, IFR here, Pribilofs to the eastern Aleutians, marginal for the central and western Aleutians, and VFR for the Panhandle. And then for Tuesday, VFR mostly, but look in the morning hours, though, marginal VFR showing up and on the increase here over the central and south coast. IFR, southeast flow, Kodiak Island, spreading northward now, south side of the Kenai Peninsula, marginal stuff working into western Prince William Sound, and also IFR building along the eastern slopes of the Western Alaska Range and Aleutian Range, also over the Kilberg Mountains, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and then westward over the Bering Sea. And then for Tuesday afternoon, this whole moisture field continues to push northeastward and northward. Marginal VFR now covering all of the Seward Peninsula, with IFR there from about Nome or maybe White Mountain westward out toward Wales. And then marginal for St. Lawrence Island, northern Bering here pretty well socked in with IFR. That'll extend into the southwest coast and the mountains. IFR now up into Prince William Sound. Marginal VFR for the Susitna and Matanuska Valleys, as well as Cook Inlet down into Shelikof Strait, but improving Kodiak Island. And marginal VFR the entire southeast coast for Tuesday afternoon, and a batch of IFR here right across Atka Island. Moving on to the passes, another VFR day for the Berks Range tomorrow. In fact, all the passes looking will be VFR. Anaktuvik-Adigan wide open on either entrance and through the pass. Lake Clark and Merrill, ceilings visibility is unlimited. Same forecast for rainy. And for windy, VFR. Isabel, VFR, and Mentasta, VFR. With Tanita, also VFR. And for Portage, looking good. Chilkoot and White, VFR. For the freezing levels, weakening upper level high pressure, still keeping the warm air aloft here with 4,000 feet right over the Seward Peninsula, 2,000 feet up across the Noatak Valley, and to the south coast of Norton Sound. Otherwise, at the surface here, you can see just north of the Pribilofs, right through Shelikof Strait, North Gulf Coast, and along the outer coastline of the Panhandle, and then a building gradient down here, mostly over the Queen Charlotte Islands, 2,000 to 8,000 feet, and that extends westward here, just catching southern Kodiak Island, and then into the eastern Aleutians. And from there, we'll look at icing. Again, that moisture lifting northward and northeastward here, so it could be a pretty good chance of seeing some considerable moderate rime icing there. Kodiak Island, Fognak Island, those areas, and also the mountainous terrain here, Aleutian Range, and the Kilberg Mountain areas. Otherwise, just isolated moderate rime icing, the remainder of the shaded area here that follows the boundary out to the west and up along that frontal boundary west-northwest across the southern central Bering Sea. And looking at the jet stream here, 33,000 foot wind flow chart, strong jet coming out of Asia, up to 200 knots, and it takes a turn to the north here and weakens. And splits actually, but now we're into replacing the cold outflow winds with southerly to southwest flow now coming up in across southern Alaska with 90 knot winds at 33,000 feet, back to the northwest 110 there for the Panhandle. And at 9,000 feet, southeasterlies 30 to 40 knots, Gulf of Alaska, Northeast Pacific, right in Kenai Peninsula, 25 to 30 here across the southwest interior. Easterlies across the northern Bering at about 25 knots and up to 30 to 40 knots with that low over the western Aleutians. 3,000 feet, southeast 25 here coming in the Kenai Peninsula, 20 to 25 across southwest interior. Much lighter up here, of course, under that ridge axis, light variable winds at about 5, and 25 to 30 knot winds with the system out west. Panhandle, pretty light and variable there tomorrow with the southeasterlies up to 25 through the Kenai Peninsula. And turbulence-wise, widespread moderate chop here over the southwest interior, Alaska Peninsula, northward into about the Unalakleet area.
Floating hundreds of miles from Earth, astronauts get a unique perspective of our planet. While they might recognize landmarks, space is the only place they can see the very edge of our planet's atmosphere.
From orbit, particularly looking at the horizon, did bring to mind how thin the atmosphere is. It's like an onion skin around this great big ball of the Earth.
This uppermost layer of Earth's atmosphere, the ionosphere, also overlaps with the very beginning of space. It's the job of NASA's new mission, GOLD, the Global Scale Observations of the Limmendisk Instrument, to study this region, a region that isn't just for astronauts to explore, but that affects humans every day down on the ground. For one thing, this layer of the upper atmosphere helps protect us from harmful radiation and energy emanating from the sun. But in our modern society, it does so much more. It affects the smartphone that sits in your pocket and the radio waves that guide our airplanes. The ionosphere is a crucial layer of the atmosphere through which our communications and GPS signals travel. And when this region changes, it impacts those communication signals. Changes can occur above this region from the sun's activity, also known as space weather. Changes can also occur below from Earth's weather, such as hurricanes and wind patterns. Gold connects the dots between how space weather and Earth's weather shape the upper reaches of the atmosphere. But this region isn't easy to study. The ionosphere spans roughly 60 to 400 miles from Earth's surface, which is too high for aircraft and scientific balloons, and the lower regions are too low to easily study with satellites. What are attainable, however, are the swaths of red and green light shining out from the upper atmosphere. Formed when the sun's rays hit atmospheric molecules, this light, named airglow, comes from green and red bands of glowing gas. Some of the airglow is invisible to our eyes, shining in infrared and ultraviolet light, which can only be seen with scientific instrumentation. Taking advantage of our planet's natural glow is gold. The gold instrument, which is about the size of a mini-fridge, is hitching a ride on a commercial communication satellite, SES-14. The satellite's orbit lies 22,000 miles above Earth, where it can record images in ultraviolet light to monitor changes in airglow across the globe. These images give information on the temperature, density, and composition of particles in the upper atmosphere. Gold collects these observations faster than any mission has ever done before. It captures an image of Earth's entire disk every 30 minutes, allowing scientists to see how the upper atmosphere evolves throughout the day. Gold joins a host of missions studying the very nature of space, around Earth, the Sun, and planets. As NASA ventures farther and farther from home, knowing the nature of space itself is crucial for our journey to understand our solar system and beyond.
There's a new class of chemical compounds impacting the Earth's ozone layer and raising concerns among some scientists. But a new NASA analysis indicates stratospheric ozone could actually be impacted more by climate change and the continued release of already banned chemicals. The Earth's ozone hole is showing signs of recovery, decades after the landmark agreement called the Montreal Protocol that banned many chemical compounds harmful to the ozone layer.
So we know the Montreal Protocol was a huge success. This was signed in the late 1980s when scientists and policymakers from around the world gathered together to try to save the ozone layer.
The chemicals they regulated persist in the atmosphere for many decades. They thin the ozone layer and they create a seasonal hole over Antarctica. They basically take away part of our planet's natural sunscreen, and that increases the risk of skin cancer and damage to plants.
Scientists have projected the ozone hole could disappear almost completely by about 2075, but several factors could delay that recovery.
There are some industrial compounds that are not banned by the Montreal Protocol, but as they enter the atmosphere, they will also hurt the ozone layer.
But the unregulated compounds have a short lifespan in the atmosphere, unlike the chlorofluorocarbons that were originally regulated. So they have a short-lived impact on ozone, and we don't think they'll delay recovery by more than a few years.
We projected by 2050, more than half of the ozone-depleting compounds in the atmosphere will come from long-lived substances banned by the protocol.
Because these compounds stay in the air for such a long time, compared to the unregulated, short-lived compounds, they will have a disproportionate and lingering impact on ozone. So any non-compliance with the protocol can have significant consequences.
And the really big uncertainty in ozone layer recovery is climate change. There are many naturally produced ozone-depleting substances that are emitted by the oceans. And as the oceans continue to warm due to climate change, those emissions will increase, and that will further delay ozone recovery.
Scientists want to better understand how climate change will affect ozone recovery.
This is a hard problem. As a scientific community, we need to work on this major issue. We now have a powerful new tool to simulate atmosphere and its interaction with land and ocean to study this issue. And that's what we're going to do.
How can you see the atmosphere? The answer is blowing in the wind. Tiny particles known as aerosols are carried by the air around the globe. This visualization uses data from NASA satellites combined with our knowledge of physics and meteorology to track 3 aerosols: dust, smoke, and sea salt. Sea salt, shown here in blue, is picked up by winds passing over the ocean. As tropical storms and hurricanes form, the salt particles are concentrated into the spiraling shape we all recognize. With their movements, we can follow the formation of Hurricane Irma and see the dust from the Sahara, shown in tan, get washed out of the storm center by the rain. Advances in computing speed allow scientists to include more details of these physical processes in their simulations of how the aerosols interact with the storm systems. The increased resolution of the computer simulation is apparent in fine details like the hurricane bands spiraling counterclockwise. Computer simulations let us see how different processes fit together and evolve as a system. By using mathematical models to represent nature, we can separate the system into component parts and better understand the underlying physics of each. Today's research improves next year's weather forecasting ability. Hurricane Ophelia was very unusual. It headed northeast, pulling in Saharan dust and smoke from wildfires in Portugal, carrying both to Ireland and the UK. This aerosol interaction was very different from other storms of the season. As computing speed continues to increase, scientists will be able to bring more scientific details into the simulations, giving us a deeper understanding of our home planet.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, ice continues to advance westward here into the Bering Sea and along the southwest coast, and not much change occurring over Bristol Bay. And over the next few days, actually, the ice here in Bristol Bay will probably be destroyed here as milder air and wave action and winds work against definitely any formation there. But up here to the north, continued easterly winds will continue that westward progression of the pack ice. Moving on to the marine forecast here for Northern Canal, winds coming down 25 knots tomorrow with 5-foot seas, down to 15 knots for Stevens Passage, and light southeast winds here across the southern inside waters, and also out along the coast, just southeast winds at 10 knots with 8-foot seas, east 15 up north. And then for Tuesday, pick the winds up a little bit there, back to 30 knots with staying under gale force there for Northern Canal. Northeast 25 here for Stevens Passage, so back to the small craft advisories there. Southeast 20 Clarence Strait, and also back to southeast 25 here for the south coast. East 25, north coast, seas running 8 to 11 feet. And for Northern Cook Inlet, light northerlies tomorrow, north 25. So small craft advisories south of the Forelands into Kachemak Bay, the Barrens east 30. Small craft advisories for the western North Gulf Coast with 9-foot seas. And also small craft advisories for the eastern North Gulf Coast due to those 8-foot seas, and northeast 10 with just 2-foot seas in Prince William Sound. Then for Tuesday, Prince William Sound, northeast 20 with 4-foot seas. Good small craft advisory level winds here, 30 knots right out of the east for the North Gulf Coast. Turn northerly here on the west side to northwest, 25 for the Barren Islands. Northeast here for Kachemak Bay, down to 20 knots now, up into southern Cook Inlet, and about 15 north of the Forelands. Kodiak Island, easterlies 30 to 35 knots with the gales occurring here over Shelikof Strait. Also from Sitkinak to all the way to Cape Sarachev, we've got gale force winds, east-southeast at 35, 12 to 14-foot seas. North side, northeast 35, so gales there, and easterly gales in store for Bristol Bay. And for the Tuesday outlook, winds coming down to southeast 20 for Bristol Bay and southeast 25 here on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. And from Cape Sarachev to Sitkinak, southerlies at 15 to 20 knots with 8 to 9-foot seas. Light winds now for Shelikof Strait and variable, and west 25 east of Kodiak. Aleutians, Fox Islands, west, southwest, 15 to 25 knots there with 7 to 12-foot seas. South to southeast at 20 for Adak and Atka, 7 to 10-foot seas. Out west, south winds turn easterly. in the farther west zone out there with seas running at about 10 feet. And then for the Tuesday outlook, even lighter winds in store for that far western zone from about Kiska on out to Shemya. Easterlies at 15. Back to the small craft advisories, east 25, turn southeast 25 to 30 knots here for the central Aleutians, and southerlies south to southeast 25 to 30 knots for the Fox Islands, with seas building 10 to 12 feet. Southwest coast, we've got northeasterly gales in store for the area south of Nunivak Island, blowing out of Kuskokwim Bay. Otherwise, north side, northeast at 20, and then for St. Lawrence Island, on up into Norton Sound, northeasterlies at 25 knots, turning east 25 for St. Matthew Island and the Pribilofs. For Tuesday, southwest 25, turns southerly 30 knots here for the southwest coast. South of the island, north of the island, you got southeast at 30 knots, and they turn easterly at 30 for the St. Lawrence Island, and brisk wind advisories also in across Norton Sound, northeast 20. For St. Matthew Island. Up along eastern Beaufort Sea coast, really light winds, westerlies 5 to 15 knots. Central coast, easterlies at about 15. Those will be on the increase here. Again, windiest here on the west side from about Point Lay or so down to Cape Lisburne. And then from about that location, they drop back to 20 knots, turn more northeast here over the Chukchi Sea. Outlook for Tuesday, easterlies 30 knots, Wales on up to Cape Thompson. Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort east at 30 knot at 20. Then you're back into the 30 knot winds on the east side there. Central coast 20 knots out of the east. And brisk wind advisories, east winds 25 knots for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Tonight again, snow continues to taper off. There will be a lingering snow shower lingering around there through much of the evening, but nothing heavy. Clearing out to the north, stays cold with less wind over the northern panhandle, clearing cold over the interior again, and a few flurries lingering on the eastern Arctic coast. But rain and wind here for the Alaska Peninsula unsettled over the Aleutians. Outlook for tomorrow, moisture making a jog to the north and northeast with rain, Kodiak, and some of that could get into southern Cook Inlet. Definitely coming across Cook Inlet, south central Alaska tomorrow night to about this position Thursday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.